Earning $100,000 a year used to be the American dream. Now, it's the ultimate middle class trap. You're making more than 60% of American households combined. On paper, you're winning. But it's Thursday night, you've got 300 bucks in your checking account, and you're low-key stressing about whether your card is going to clear at the grocery store. Here's what no one tells you. The problem isn't your salary, and it's definitely not your Netflix subscription. The problem is that you're paying an invisible tax on every single thing you own, and you don't even know it. You've been trained to think in monthly payments, while the system is quietly draining your life force in hours. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where your $100,000 is actually going, why lifestyle creep is a physics problem, and the one mathematical shift that turns a $400 gap into a $1 million exit strategy. Let's look at the numbers. Let's run the numbers. You make $100,000. That's $8,333 a month before Uncle Sam takes his cut. After federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare, depending on where you live, you're likely bringing home between $5,800 and $6,200. That's real money. It's more than enough to be comfortable. But here's the problem. Most people at this stage look at their bank account, see it's empty, and go after the low-hanging fruit. They cancel Netflix, they delete Spotify, they save $15.49 and tell themselves they're getting their finances together. That's not a spending problem, that's a thinking problem. The real issue isn't that you're buying too much stuff, it's that you've never been taught to calculate what stuff actually costs. Not the sticker price, not the monthly payment. Let's look at the car, the literal anchor of the American middle class. The average new car payment in the US is around $735 a month. That's the sticker cost. But here's the shadow math. Add insurance, $180, gas, $200, maintenance, tires, and those random $400 repairs that hit you like a sucker punch. Suddenly, that car is costing you $1,500 a month just to exist. On a $6,000 take-home salary, that's 25% of your life gone before you even pay rent, before you buy a single bag of groceries. You are working 1 out of every 4 weeks just to drive to the job that pays for the car. And then there's the housing, rent or mortgage. Another $1,600 to $2,200. Now you're at 50% of your income committed to 2 things, a place to sleep and a way to get to work. This is the hard truth. $100,000 is no longer a wealthy salary in the United States. Not in this economy. But the reason you feel broke isn't just inflation. It's because you've been trained by every retailer and bank to think in monthly increments. When you think in increments, you lose the ability to see the total weight. And when you can't see the weight, you can't feel the chains. But breaking those chains isn't about spreadsheets. It's about a psychological shift in how you value your time. The shift that actually changes things isn't budgeting, it's not a spreadsheet app, and it's not automating transfers into a savings account, although that kind of thing can help around the edges. The real shift is learning to calculate the true hourly cost of every financial decision you make. Here's how it works. You make $100,000 a year. After taxes, you're taking home roughly $72,000, give or take, depending on your state. Divide that by 2,080 working hours in a year, and you're earning about $34.60 per hour of your actual life. Now imagine you're looking at a $1,200 couch. Do you know what that couch really costs? It costs you 34.7 hours of your life. That's almost a full work week. Sitting behind a desk in meetings, answering emails, doing whatever it is you do, you'll spend nearly an entire week of your life just to own that couch. Does the couch deserve a week of your life? Maybe it does. That's a fair answer. But the point is, you should be making that trade consciously. You should know what you're giving in exchange for what you're getting. Most people don't. They swipe a card and later feel a vague kind of regret, but they can't really explain why. When you start thinking in hours instead of dollars, something strange happens. The emotional pull of purchases starts to change. That $8 daily coffee habit feels a little different when you realize it's costing you about 58 hours a year, a full week and a half of work just to fund that one habit. Maybe it's worth it. But now at least you know the cost is being measured in something real. And then there's the second layer of this, what I'd call the shadow cost. Everything a purchase brings with it that you didn't pay for at the register. Let's say you buy a boat. The boat itself was $18,000. A good deal. But then you need somewhere to store it. That's $200 a month. Insurance is another $100 a month. Then maintenance, registration, gear, trips to the marina. By the time you actually use that boat 8 or 10 times in a summer, you're effectively paying somewhere between $400 and $600 per outing. And that's before you even count the time. The hours spent maintaining it, hauling it, winterizing it. People buy boats because boats feel like freedom. But a boat sitting in storage for 9 months out of the year is really just a very expensive obligation with a hull. And this isn't an argument against owning a boat. It's an argument for understanding what owning a boat actually means before you write the check. The same math applies to houses. There's a reason financial advisors used to call a house an asset, and why a growing number of serious economists now push back on that idea. A house you live in doesn't generate income, it generates expenses, property taxes, HOA fees if you have them, maintenance, which is often estimated at 1% to 2% of the home's value every year. On a $400,000 house, that's $4,000 to $8,000 annually. Then homeowners insurance, higher utilities than renting, and the constant creep of repairs and upgrades that homeownership always seems to demand. None of that is money you're investing. That's money that disappears. Yes, the house may appreciate in value, often it does, but you only really capture that appreciation if you sell. And most Americans don't sell, they refinance, pull cash out, and borrow against the equity they built. Then the cycle starts all over again. This isn't pessimism, it's arithmetic. And here's what the financial content industry almost never tells you. The path to building real wealth in America is not just about earning more. Plenty of people earn more every single year and still go nowhere. What matters is the gap, the actual dollar distance between what you earn and what your life costs to operate. And the biggest lever you have on that gap usually isn't your income. It's the hidden operational cost of your possessions and your commitments. Because your income has a ceiling, at least in the short term. It tends to grow slowly through raises, promotions, maybe a better job. But your lifestyle costs, those can explode almost overnight. You upgrade the apartment, you get a new car, you decide to have kids, you buy a house, and suddenly your monthly obligations jump by $2,000 and your gap almost disappears. Now you're running just to stay in place. The people who actually escape this, and they do exist, they're not unicorns, tend to have one thing in common. They are ruthlessly aware of the operational cost of their life. They know exactly what it costs them each month just to exist. And they protect the gap between that number and their income like it's sacred. Because it is. That gap is where freedom lives. That gap is where investment capital comes from. That gap is the difference between retiring in your 50s or working until you physically can't anymore. And building that gap requires a completely different relationship with stuff. Not minimalism for its own sake, not some aesthetic preference for owning fewer things, but a deliberate, calculated understanding that every recurring obligation you add to your life, whether it's a car payment, a storage unit that costs $120 a month, a gym membership you barely use, or a house that's $400 a month more than you really need, every single one of those things is a direct deduction from your future. It's future you writing a check, future you who might want to quit a job, start something new, move somewhere else, take a year off, or just breathe without the constant background pressure of financial stress. You're making decisions right now that future you will be forced to honor, and future you doesn't get a vote. Let's do the math that almost nobody does. Say you make $100,000 a year, you're taking home about $6,000 a month. Right now, your cost of living, rent, car, food, subscriptions, minimum debt payments, everything is running around $5,600 a month. That means your gap is $400. That's not unusual. In fact, that's pretty common for someone at that income level living in a mid cost American city. And it explains why so many people who look successful on the outside feel constantly stressed about money on the inside. Because a $400 gap means one unexpected expense: a car repair, a medical bill, a last minute flight home for a family emergency, and suddenly you're going backwards. You're not building anything, you're just holding your breath and hoping nothing breaks. Now imagine you get more deliberate. You spend 3 months auditing the true cost of your possessions and commitments. And then you make a few decisions. You trade that $735 monthly payment for a reliable pre owned car. Even if it costs you some savings up front, you eliminate a major monthly bleed and drop your transportation cost by about $500. You call your insurance company and actually negotiate, saving another $40 a month. You cancel two subscriptions you've been meaning to cancel for the last 8 months. You renegotiate your internet plan. Nothing dramatic, no suffering, no rice and beans for a year nonsense. And just like that, your gap goes from $400 a month to $950 a month. More than double, without a raise, without a side hustle, without changing your income at all. Now that $950 a month goes into index funds at an average 8% annual return, which is historically a pretty conservative assumption for diversified index fund investing over the long term. That $950 a month becomes something much bigger over time. After 10 years, roughly $174,000. After 20 years, somewhere around $557,000. After 30 years, over $1.4 million. Think about that. From $400 to $950. From one conversation about your car, two canceled subscriptions, and a phone call to your insurance company. That's not some motivational poster number I made up. That's compound interest doing exactly what it does once you stop interrupting it with lifestyle creep. And here's the part that changes everything. The part nobody talks about because it doesn't fit neatly on a spreadsheet. When your gap grows, when the distance between what you earn and what your life costs starts getting wider, something changes in the way you move through the world. You stop making decisions from desperation. You stop saying yes to the job you hate just because you can't afford to say no. You stop fighting with your partner at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday over a charge on the account that doesn't make sense. You stop living with that low-grade hum of financial anxiety, the kind that becomes so normal you stop even recognizing it as anxiety and just assume that's what adult life is supposed to feel like. But that's not what adult life has to feel like. A lot of people just never find that out. And right now, the American economy is not doing anyone any favors. Inflation hit hard. And even though the headline numbers may look better, the lived experience, grocery bills, rent, car prices, insurance costs hasn't gone back to what it used to be. Interest rates may have come down from their peaks, but credit card APRs are still brutal. The labor market feels more uncertain than it has in years for a lot of white collar workers. AI is already restructuring jobs faster than most people have clear answers for. That's the environment you're operating in. And in that environment, waiting for a raise to fix your life is a losing strategy. Waiting for the economy to get easier is probably a much longer wait than you want to take. The only variable you truly control is the cost of your life and what you do with the gap you create. That is the leverage point. That is where the game is actually played. And the identity shift that happens when you start thinking this way is real, and it lasts. You stop being someone who earns money and spends money. You start becoming someone who earns money, protects a gap, and deploys capital. Those are different people. They make different decisions automatically. Not because they have more discipline, not because they have more willpower, but because the framework they use to evaluate choices is fundamentally different. Every time they see something shiny with a monthly payment attached to it, a different question fires in their brain. Not, can I afford the payment? But, what does this cost me in hours? What is the shadow cost? And what am I giving up by not putting that money to work? And once that question gets installed, it doesn't leave. It changes you. So here's what you do right now. Before you watch another video, before you read another budgeting thread, before you subscribe to another finance newsletter, open your bank account. Look at the last 30 days of transactions. Add up every recurring charge, every subscription, every payment, every automatic deduction. Then add your rent or mortgage, then your car payment and insurance. Write that total down on a piece of paper. That number is the operating cost of your life. Now subtract it from your take home pay. Whatever's left is your gap. And if that number is under $500, then you don't have a motivation problem. You don't have a discipline problem. You don't need a better coffee budget. You have a structural problem, and structural problems need structural solutions. So figure out which single thing on that list has the highest shadow cost relative to the actual value it adds to your life. Not value in general, value in your life. Then cut it or reduce it. Do that now, before this video ends.